This episode of the .NET Core podcast is brought to you in part by RJJ Software. RJJ Software is dedicated to helping you realize your company's digital potential through innovative solutions using the latest technologies. Utilizing the latest in .NET and cloud technologies, we can help you build the solution your business needs on time and under budget. We have world-class experience in cross-platform development using the latest iterations of the Microsoft technology stack. This includes .NET Core, SQL Server, and Azure. Is Azure not your thing? That's fine, because we have experience in AWS, GCP, Linode, and DigitalOcean too. We know what it means to have to be able to iterate quickly and how important DevOps practices are when it comes to remaining agile. As such, we have experts in the major build and release pipelines, from Azure DevOps to AWS, from Netlify to Travis CI, AppVeyor, and everything in between. So get in touch today at rjj-software.co.uk or check the show notes for a link. Hello everyone and welcome to the .NET Core podcast, the only podcast which is devoted to .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, EF Core, SignalR, and not forgetting the .NET Core community itself. I am your host, Jamie Caprogman-Taylor, and this is episode 68, Xamarin Catch-Up with Luce Carter. In this episode, I talked with Luce about some of the things that have been happening in the Xamarin and Maui worlds recently. Luce is a Microsoft MVP, a curator of the weekly Xamarin newsletter, and a Twilio champion and an international speaker. So let's sit back, open up the terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and let the show begin. So thank you ever so much, Luce, for being on the show. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show. We've not talked about Xamarin very much on this show, and I really want to get into it. So hopefully we can cover a little bit about that. But welcome to the show.
No, Jamie, thanks a lot for having me. It's exciting to be here, and I love talking about Xamarin. So if anyone ever says to me, "Hey, come and talk about your favourite subject for a while," I'm always up for it.
Excellent. Okay. So I guess before we get on to Xamarin and all that kind of stuff, I was wondering, could you give the listeners a bit of an introduction, just so that, they may not know a lot about who you are and the work that you're doing and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Luce Carter. I'm a software developer at a customer data science company called dunnhumby, who are probably better known as being the founders of Clubcard a long time ago. Because it's actually named after the people who created Clubcard, which is quite interesting. But so we're part of the Tesco's group, but we're our own company, and I currently do QA for them at the moment. So I started as a developer, but imposter syndrome bit quite badly last year, and I'm quite happy to be open about it. And so I just took a break and moved into QA for a bit, and actually just really liked it, because it's still the same logical thing as writing code, it's just a bit less terrifying. So I've been doing that for about 6 to 8 months now, and then a couple of weeks ago I started doing automated testing with Cypress, so I get to kind of write a little bit of code again, but still on the testing side. Then away from work, I am a Microsoft MVP under Developer Technologies. Obviously Developer Technologies covers pretty much anything code related, but I'd probably say that although I'm a sort of jack of all trades for some Microsoft products, Xamarin is definitely my speciality, and it's my favourite subject. I'm probably the only person in the world who has a Xamarin shrine in their kitchen.
Okay, we got to talk about that in a minute.
But so as well as being a Microsoft MVP and, the only person with a Xamarin shrine, I'm also a Twilio champion. So for those who don't know, because it's not Microsoft related, Twilio is a tech company that provides APIs and SDKs for communication. So anything from chat, not just SMS chat, but WhatsApp and other products like that, video and phone calls. And I just really like them as a company, and I don't use them much with Xamarin itself, but I've just got some really great friends that work there, and I've done blogs for them and stuff. And so they honoured me with their sort of MVP equivalent title of Twilio champion. So if you've got any communication needs, check them out, because I think they're great. And then sort of outside of that, I tend to stream sometimes, write the odd blog, YouTube occasionally, or try and take a break from the computer because I'm guilty of working way too much. But I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. I have to attest to taking some time away from the computer. The people who know me in real life will never admit to, you're really fat, Jimmy, but I'm really fat, Jimmy. And so I try to go out for a walk or a run at least once a day. But this will date the recording because of Timecast pod machine wibbly wobbliness is what I call it. There's like a time slip involved in podcasting. We're recording this about a week after the great heat wave of 2020. So that kind of put a dampener on going out and going for a walk and a run.
Yeah, I can imagine. I do run sometimes. I always have a tradition of running a 5K on Christmas Day. So I've got an excuse for Christmas dinner. And yeah, that's fine in December, but I couldn't imagine running a 5K right now. It's been hotter this week, but it was sort of 33, 34 Celsius, which is something about between 87 and 90 Fahrenheit for our imperial metric, whichever it is, listeners. So pretty warm and humid, which doesn't help.
Absolutely. It's been a nice break because over in the UK, I always joke that over in the UK, our summer hotness, the heat in summer lasts about 2 hours. So it's been a nice break, but then it kind of gets old very quickly.
Yeah, I don't enjoy the mugginess, kind of all the humidity, but at the same time, I like the sun, and so I'd rather have this than winter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
At least summer doesn't stop you going anywhere because you're snowed in.
That's it. If I had the choice of going somewhere hot or going somewhere where you can't leave and you have to put on 15 layers of clothes just to get out of bed, I'm going somewhere hot. It's that simple.
Definitely.
Excellent. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Xamarin there. I was wondering, before we even talk about Xamarin, what's with the Xamarin shrine in the kitchen?
Okay,
if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I used to work as a graduate for an IT company called Fujitsu, who started making a Xamarin-based app, which is actually out in the wild now. If you've ever been on UK trains and you've seen some of the red and black foam cases that they use to sell tickets and check tickets, that's actually like phones with the Fujitsu-made Xamarin app running on the phones. And so we had a Xamarin partnership back before Xamarin was purchased by Microsoft. So I gained a load of stickers. So I had loads of really cool sunset colour, sort of gradient type Xamarin stickers. They re-released them last year, but they weren't quite as good quality as the old ones. Still great stickers, but I had all these stickers left. And then anyone that knows about Xamarin was probably heard of James Montemagno at Microsoft. And he does a podcast with Frank Kruger, the one and only creator of SQLite.net, that a lot of people probably have heard of. They do this podcast together, and on New Year's Day, I think it was 2018 or 2019, I woke up at like 8 in the morning UK time, and obviously that's midnight on the Pacific coast. And so I saw that they'd released an episode where they announced they started a Patreon, and I became their first ever Patreon supporter. And so I actually got a very nice handwritten card from both James and Frank. So I kind of ended up at this point where I had this handwritten card that I was really grateful and proud of, plus all these stickers. And I just ended up thinking, what can I do with it? And so the stickers I just stuck to some lined paper and then cut around it into a fun shape, and then put the card on the wall. So yeah, I just have some stickers and a card on the wall, because why not?
That sounds awesome. I have to say, yeah, being the first patron for something is always, being first at something, as long as it's a good thing, is always fun, right?
Yeah, but it was just so sweet of them to send me a card just because I was their first supporter, and and they said really kind things in it as well. So yeah, it was just something that I didn't want to just stick in a drawer. I wanted to put it somewhere pride of place, and so my kitchen seemed perfect.
It's as good a place as any, I suppose. I mean, we all spend a lot of time in our kitchens, right?
Yeah, and I've got open plan as well, so I've got a little table in my kitchen, so it's just next to the table. So it's a key part of my living space.
I see. And then when all of this nonsense is over, I like to say nonsense just because, well, A, on podcasts, we're not allowed to say the name of it because you actually get shut down. And B, because I feel like making fun of it slightly makes it a little less scary. When all of this nonsense is over, when people come over, they're like, hey, what's this? Oh, well, let me tell you about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been up on the wall for a couple of years now, I think. And yeah, definitely when people come around for the first time, a few of them will be like, oh, what's this? And then I can tell them the story. So they might not benefit from Xamarin because they're not technical, but it's still a fun story.
Yeah, right. They probably still benefit from Xamarin even though they're not developers, because it's like, hey, I have a mobile phone, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Which I guess takes us neatly onto, I guess, the subject of the episode. So we've talked a little. I've talked to Jim Bennett in the past on Xamarin, but that was like we recorded it in really early 2018 and released it in very early 2019, and it's now summer 2020, which means there's a whole bunch of stuff that's changed, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's come a long way. Yes.
So I was wondering, can you talk to us a little bit about, because people, let me just dial back a bit. I'm going like, I've got 15 different threads going on. I'm really bad for this. So for the folks who don't know what Xamarin is, can you give us a really brief intro to what it is? Because people don't listen to podcasts from the beginning to now. They pick them up when they want, right?
Yeah, so Xamarin essentially is a thin .NET wrapper around the native SDKs and APIs for a lot of the platforms. It started out as mobile platforms, but it now supports more than that. So there's iOS, UWP, Android, Mac OS, but then it also supports some other things as well, like watchOS, tvOS, some stuff from Tizen from Samsung, which we'll cover later maybe, because that's quite cool and deserves a conversation of its own. But yeah, so it can go on watches, TVs, obviously because it's UWP, it can even go on an Xbox if you want. I tried fiddling the other day with Unity as well, so I actually attempted to see what would happen if you put a Xamarin app on an Oculus Quest.
Right.
And so, yeah, so pretty much it really supports .NET everywhere. But yeah, so it's these thin wrappers, but because it's just a wrapper, it means that you get all the native tools and everything as part of it. So you use whether it's C# or F#, whichever language you prefer, you can use that to write your applications, and it's 100% API access. So anything that you could do in Objective-C and Swift for iOS or Kotlin and Java for Android, you can do using C# or F#. But once you step away from that wrapper, it starts to use the native compilers again. So, Android's own compiler and iOS's build chain. It uses all of that under the hood so that it's all native after that. So you write it how you want, but from that point onwards, it's fully native. So you get access to everything that, all the APIs and SDKs, but it also looks and feels identical on the platform. So once you're using the app, you have absolutely no idea what's written in Xamarin. It's just an app on your phone. So, that's pretty cool. But as I said, it's the fact that it allows you to use .NET that I think is really powerful. And because it's just a wrapper, unlike some of the other competitors, it means that it really is just a native experience and everything. It's only the code writing level that is anything but native.
Right, I see. I have noticed that when I've used things like is it Ionic?
Yeah.
Or is that the company that does web hosting? It's Ionic, yes. Using Ionic and all the different other like JavaScript-based tools to actually is it React Native and all these Apache Spark and things like that, where you're writing everything in JavaScript, you're hitting a build, and then hopefully something comes out the other end. The developer experience has not been, shall we say, as exciting to use as Xamarin. I know that when I hit build on a Xamarin project, it actually produces something.
Yeah,
and,
and I think one of the great things as well is not just because you can use .NET and the native tools, but because it is the native tools. If you're using something that's JavaScript related or whatever, or another language, a lot of the time, because it's not native, you're waiting for someone to make it available to you if a new feature comes out. Whereas Xamarin is great at being available almost day one or very quickly. You can normally get access to a preview build that will give you access to the next release. Even just today on Twitter, I saw the day of recording, I saw a tweet about, if you go to the preview channel on Visual Studio for Mac, for example, it'd be the same for Visual Studio, you can target the next iOS 14. So it's not even in public preview yet, but Xamarin's already given you a preview channel that you can go and update Visual Studio and have access to all the new features straight away. So it's very, very powerful.
That is amazing. I do like that.
The thing as well is that it's not just, allowing you to write .NET code, but it's also allows you to kind of get the same native performance because it's all the same build tools underneath. So you're not seeing any kind of hit because you've got an extra layer. It's just a wrapper that disappears at build time. And so that's cool. And kind of the way it works as well is that you've got, it's kind of two flavors of Xamarin. You've got Xamarin as a kind of stack. So you have the traditional one where you can just target specifically Android or iOS, or I say UWP, but I guess if you're just targeting UWP, if you just do UWP rather than Xamarin, but it gives you shared business logic. So it's not just allowing you to write apps with C# or F#, but it's actually allowing you to reuse the code. So you write it once and you can use it cross-platform. So it saves you a load of time as well. And it's just, and because it's .NET and it's the shared project, as they call it, it's a .NET standard project, it also means that you can bring in other .NET projects and use them as well. There's no, because it's .NET standard rather than say something like .NET Core, yes, there are some differences, but you can still go, well, I've got this, I don't know, it might be a .NET Core application that just makes some REST endpoint calls. Well, you can just reuse that, just add it in the solution and carry on. So it's very powerful and productive.
Sure. That's the kind of thing that I like to hear. That's a code reuse, because otherwise you're gonna, you spend ages writing some wonderful class structure or some bunch of functions that work wonderfully. And then you're like, this is great. And I've architected it really well. And it's really clean. It's really testable. It's 100% test coverage, although you should never really aim for 100%. And then you go, right, okay, new project. I'm going to start all of that all over again.
Yeah, no, it's great for that. And also, as well as sort of the Xamarin Native, as we call it, as I said, which just targets one platform, they also have something which a lot of people will probably use automatically called Xamarin Forms. So all Xamarin Forms is just an extra part to your project that allows you to share UI as well. So you're saving even more time by being able to either in XAML, which is like it's extensible application markup language. If you've done WPF or UWP before, it's the same. It's not the same flavor dialect, so it's slightly different, but it's very similar and it's still declarative and nice to use. So you can do your UIs in XAML, or you can do them in C#. And again, because it's just the native tools underneath, once it's out on the phone, it looks how it should on Android out of the box. It looks how it should on iOS out of the box, or whatever other platform you target. And you just don't know. So it's even, Forms is nice to use, and it's even more code sharing.
Sure. And I guess, does that mean that it hooks into like the platform specific accessibility tools and stuff like that?
It doesn't even need to plug in because it's all native underneath. Once you start building and compiling, anything that you get, it's all just native after that. So all the features that you'd be used to, like accessibility, is all there. Don't get me wrong, there are some things that can be improved with accessibility with some of the components of Xamarin Forms, but anyone who's frustrated by it, I can assure you that I'm actually a member of an advisory group for accessibility in Xamarin Forms where we meet monthly to talk about how it can be improved. So yeah, it's getting better all the time. Sure. So it's pretty good, but it can be improved, but it will be improved. It is being improved, right? Yes. Okay. It may even be drastically improved or changed in some way by the time this podcast comes out. Oh, so no watch doubt, this space, no I say. Yeah. Definitely. Okay. So you mentioned both Xamarin and Xamarin Forms. Yep. Are they the same thing? As one a subset of the other? Does one hang off of the other, or is it completely different? So one hangs off the other. So Xamarin is Xamarin itself is the sort of technology stack that allows you to use, Mono and all the other things to, and .NET to make the apps. But then Xamarin Forms is just the shared UI part of it. So if you can either, as I said, target Xamarin Native, as we call it, which is just using, .NET to write a single targeted platform app, or you can do Forms, but both Forms and Native just share the same underlying technology, if that makes sense. So you can, when you create an application, you can pick which flavor of Xamarin you want to target when you create the application. So, it could be Xamarin Forms or Xamarin Native. You can just pick, in whichever IDE you choose to use, because Xamarin is supported by Visual Studio for Windows, Mac, and Rider. Okay. So we're going a little bit off topic from the stuff that we
So inside baseball talk, I put together a document and send it over of these are roughly the things we're going to talk about. And one of the things that's not on there is, what's the 10,000 foot level difference between Xamarin Forms and Xamarin Native then? Just because you brought them up, right?
Yeah. So it's literally to do with which platforms it targets and how the UI is written. So if you pick Xamarin Native, and so you say that I want a Xamarin.Android app, or I want a Xamarin.iOS app, or Xamarin.UWP, or whatever, you'll just target that one platform, which means that the UI is not shared. So you'd have your shared business logic in a .NET Standard project still, but when you want to declare things like the UI, you still have to use XML for Android, that used to be .xml, or storyboards in iOS. So you still need that knowledge of how to do it in those different platforms. Whereas with Forms, as I said, it's just SAML or C#, and it takes care of the rest of how it would be generated on those specific platforms. And so it's much easier, and I think it lowers the barrier to entry a lot. And for anyone who's doing Xamarin in the enterprise, of course, it lowers your time to market because you don't have to develop multiple UIs. So you save money on hiring people that know about how to write these UIs, and you'll get to market quicker.
Sure, okay. I like that. Anything that lowers the barrier to entry, I am all for. Regardless of whether it's for developers who have already used something or whether it's someone who's completely new to something, lowering that barrier of entry, allowing more people to come in and use it, I'm all for that.
Yeah, no, I love Xamarin Forms. I've been using it. Obviously, I'm just a hobbyist Xamarin developer, but, I've been using it for years. I discovered it was much, much easier. I didn't have to worry about how to do it on every platform, and I was like, right, sold. And every single new app I make is Xamarin Forms, no question. I've got no reason to limit what platforms I target. So why would I make my life harder by not sharing the UI as well?
Absolutely.
But one thing that might be interesting to touch on, actually, where we're discussing the differences between native and Forms, is that they actually support mixing the two. So you can actually have a native project and go, right, well, this, I've got Xamarin Android and I've got Xamarin Native, and you might have reasons which back in the day mattered. So a long time ago, it was much harder to do things like graphics. And so you'd have to go to the platform level and use those libraries. There's options, much more options now, like Skier Sharp and things like that. But yeah, back in the day, there was fewer, like what we call libraries that allow you to, do stuff that would be done differently on each platform, and they take care of how it's done. And yeah, so you can have maybe a native application that you created many years ago, but you can go, well, I want this login page, for example, to look, feel, and work the same on every platform. So you can just use your native app, but just drop in a Forms page, and vice versa. You could have a Forms application, but then you decide that you want something to look specific on each platform, and that's when you can then go down to the platform level and just be like, hey, on this platform I want it to look like this, on this platform I want it to look like that, and then you just include that page in your Forms. So in fact, you've got even less reason to pick and choose now, because you can just do what works for you.
Right, I see. So it isn't a case of one or the other, it's which bits would you like in this one and which bits would you like in that one, or you can just go with one or the other.
Yeah, I still stand by Forms being the best choice. Like I'd say if you're creating a new application now, stick with Forms because it's getting a lot better. You can still add in, platform level features if platform level code if you need to for whatever reason. But yeah, apart from that, Forms is great, and there's a lot of plugins out there as well as like libraries or plugins, whatever terms are interchangeable. But they're all out there, so there's a lot of things that maybe out of the box Xamarin Forms doesn't allow you to do. So, for example, taking a picture or a video, because how you'd access the camera or your gallery or photos, whatever you want to call it, on Android and iOS is completely different. Not just obviously from a user perspective, but from a code perspective. So people have generated plugins that literally, excuse the pun, but plug the gap. And so it's getting even better to use Forms now. And James Montemagno, who we mentioned earlier, he wrote a lot of plugins dating back to when he first started using Xamarin. And a lot of his plugins, he created so many of them that now he works at Microsoft. He started a project to create something called Xamarin Essentials, which is bringing in as many of his plugins as possible with a refactor and a bit more, proper enterprise style build and sort of deployment pipeline. But he brought all that in, and that's now, if you create a new Xamarin Forms app, it brings in that NuGet package automatically. So you've already got access to, I think it's something about 100 APIs that you didn't before. So all the silly things that you'd probably take for granted that you'd need access to, like battery status, internet connectivity, because you're on a phone, people can lose signal. It's not like sat at home when they're always going to be on Wi-Fi. And so, yeah, and there's accelerometer, there's 100, I could list loads of them, but it's, the plugins are getting a lot bigger, so I just generally don't think there's a reason not to use Forms for a new application these days. Sure.
That makes sense. And yeah, as long as you don't have to, if you want to be, I guess it comes down to like, if you want to be able to make your application cross-platform, I guess, and reach that highest level of user base, which enterprise really loves that, and startups really love that. If I can push one button, produce one app, and just deploy it everywhere, that's it's wonderful. That.
Yeah, and it comes back to what I said before about, I'd say time to market, that's such an enterprise term, but, even so, whether it's time to market or just time to get it in pockets, like I'm an iPhone user and I do have an old Android phone because I only moved to iPhone last year, but, it might be that you want to try it out on the different platforms and you can just say, can you try this out for me? But, out of the box that you can just do that. You don't have to do any extra work. You just go, I want to target them all.
It's like Pokemon, isn't it? Gotta target them all. Xamarin. That could totally be in. No,
yes.
They probably wouldn't go for that because that would be copyright strike.
Well, that's true,
we could totally do something like that.
Well, that's a good jingle. I like
it. Excellent. Okay. So there's lots going on in Xamarin, and there's lots going on as we move into .NET 5 and .NET 6 and .NET X, I guess, or .NET N. N, that's probably the better one. Or .NET I don't know.
.NET N.
But yeah. So what are some of your favorite maybe new features, or that they're either new to you, new to the Xamarin universe? I don't know whether ecosystem, that's it, or whether it's just new to someone like me who's only really heard of Xamarin from like a year ago. What are some of your favorite things?
Oh God, so many things. I could be here all day, but so one of the great things is that I think it was in 2018, but apologies if the date is wrong, but at some point they open sourced Xamarin Forms, which means that it's all out there on GitHub. So the community have been submitting PRs and raising issues and doing things to improve it and add new features for a long time now. So it's ever expanding with all the different things it can do. And sometimes it's, it might not be a new feature. It might just be, I've got, I want this feature to target UWP, because it might be that they've gone, well, our stats show that not many people use this on UWP. And so we're not going to spend the time supporting it, but feel free to. So that, it opens up all of that. And so there's a lot of new stuff that comes in that's fantastic. There's I don't know how to say his surname, so I'm not going to butcher it, but I think he's just Vincent.net on Twitter. But he generated a fantastic library called C# for Markup, which allowed you, for those of you that write UIs in C#, which people do, XAML tends to be the most common, and you see that most in code samples and documentation, but it does support C#. And C# for Markup just gives you a nicer experience. But Vincent was able to just go onto GitHub and incorporate the C# for Markup into Xamarin Forms, go through the process with the team, and now it's in Xamarin Forms, as of I think it's 4.7 or 4.8. So yeah, the ability to add new things is a feature that I love, but it just means a lot of cool stuff is coming. So 4.8 came out recently of Xamarin Forms, and they introduced gradient and like shapes and paths and gradient brushes, which to some people they would have been able to use for years, and it sounds like nothing, but all developers like to make things look shiny. Yeah, and things like brushes only came out recently, and I tried it last night. It took me less than 10 minutes to make a rainbow gradient across a component. So it's that kind of iteration that I really like. So brushes is one that I like because I was able to make a rainbow yesterday.
That's fair enough.
No one else could be able to see this, obviously, because it's a podcast, but I actually have a rainbow heart on my wrist, so I'm all for rainbows. So it's fun. Just trying to think of some of my favourite things. So some of them I think will be looking ahead. So as you mentioned with .NET 5 and .NET 6, Xamarin Forms it's not being rebranded, it's evolving. So it goes back to your Pokemon reference. It's evolving into .NET 6. So what they're trying to do with .NET 5 and .NET 6 is unify the .NET platforms and try and get away from .NET Framework. Apologies if anyone gets offended by what I just said, but yes, they're trying to move away from that to a one .NET platform. So It was going to be in .NET 5, but obviously, you know, the thing that we can't talk about has impacted a lot of people, so it's been pushed back to .NET 6. But yeah, they're evolving Xamarin Forms into something called MAUI, or Multi-Application User Interface, as part of .NET 6. So as I said, that's an evolution of Xamarin Forms, so it's a lot of the things that you're used to already, but with some improvements. And so it will there'll be performance, and they'll simplify some stuff like how you contribute or how you extend existing controls. But the thing that I'm most excited about is because it's moving under the .NET umbrella officially. Obviously, it's already .NET, because it's moving under that one .NET idea that Microsoft have got, which is a valid idea. It'll start moving over to I think it's Windows templating engine, which means that we'll finally be able to do from the .NET SDK CLI, .NET New, and whatever they decide to call the acronym to create a Xamarin project. And, you know, not only is that nicer for those of us that like the CLI, but also, because it's moving to the templating engine, we'll be able to make templates a lot easier. So you get a blank template in Visual Studio, and there's also some like templates that you can pick for some other styles, or maybe a layout like a grid and stuff. So it gives you code samples to work with, which is great if you're trying to learn something. But, you know, even regardless whether it's a Xamarin project or something else, I'm sure there's certain libraries or architecture that you implement in your app as soon as you create it. And so by introducing the templating engine, we'll be able to actually just spin up templates that then you can say .NET New and create this. So one for me is that Xamarin Forms, the most popular architectures used for it is Model View Model, or MVVM. And MVVM is great, and it is very simple to use, but to make it even simpler, I like to use a plugin that James created called MVVM Helpers. So the first thing I do when I create a new application is set up the view models folder, bring in the library, you know, maybe create, extend the class to implement so use the MVVM helpers, because there's something called a base view model that you can extend your, what's the term would be? I'm too warm to think straight.
You can inherit from, so
yeah. So you can, say base view model, and it's all there. So that's one of the things I do straight away. And what I'd love to do, and I tried to do it, and I'll tell the story in a minute, is, just bring that in so you can say to people, you know, in open source, here, if you always use MVVM helpers and MVVM, here's a template that you can use so you can just spin up an app in the shape that you want. So just touching on that story, so because I always do that repetition, a few months ago I actually tried creating a template in Visual Studio. The old-fashioned way, you know, you create the project and then you start saying to Visual Studio, hey, can you use this as a template? And, you know, I made it all nice, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great, isn't it? But then I learned what the problem is. It doesn't dynamically change the name, so it was giving me a new project with all the names for the files that I gave it, whereas I wanted it to replace them with whatever you wanted to call it. So, you know, I didn't want it to be called, you know, Xamarin Forms MVVM template for your namespaces. I wanted it to be whatever you called your solution. Now, a former Xamarin program manager at Microsoft, he's still at Microsoft, he's just on a different team now, called Piers Bogan. He said to me on Twitter, he's like, oh, yeah, if you use a templating engine, you can solve that problem. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about with MAUI, is just that I can create a template that not only helps me, but other people. Just save time. I don't have to then import the NuGet and set it all up. It will just be there. So that's going to be cool. So, yeah, that's the thing I'm definitely most excited about with MAUI and what's coming.
Okay. There's a couple of things to unpack there. I just wanted to, only because early in the show's history, somebody had said something about moving away from .NET Framework, and somebody came out with, the sky is falling, because somebody said it on this podcast. I just want to, I'm not an MVP, so I'm not privy to it, but my understanding of the whole situation is .NET Framework has the same support lifecycle as Windows. So as long as Windows is around, .NET Framework will still be around. It's just the new innovations. The term that I've heard is the new hotness
yes.
will be in
yes,
.NET 5, 6, 7, 8, but Framework will still be around. It's not like the sky is falling or anything.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I should have, I don't want to upset anyone. Yeah, you're right. .NET Framework's not going anywhere. It will always be supported. It just won't be evolved upon. You know, whatever, there'll be, I don't know the exact number, but there'll be a version of .NET Framework where they go, that's the last kind of release. And it'll be the same with Xamarin Forms. I think after Xamarin Forms 5, that'll be it. It'll move to MAUI. So don't panic. The sky's not falling. .NET Framework's not going anywhere. But yeah, as you say, the new hotness is going into .NET 5 and 6.
Sure. And there was something you said there about the templating engine. I absolutely love the .NET New. I think it's called .NET New 3 because they've iterated on it. But the .NET New CLI path is wonderful. And an employer that I used to work for, I've since moved on and done other things. I actually spent some time and built, because they were basically doing the same thing in Visual Studio, file new, add this project, add loads of NuGet packages, set all this up, and then spend 4 or 5 days writing boilerplate code. And I kind of went, can I get a copy of that when you're done at the boilerplate code side? And then all I did was, you create a template.json file, and then that's it. It's a template, and you just do .NET New install this template. And then you can just do from the command line .NET New in the name of your template. And if you do, I think it's, --n. Oh, no, sorry, !n or --name, then whatever you type in becomes the core namespace for everything, which is wonderful. But yeah, I did try to do it inside of Visual Studio, and I think only one person on the planet really knows how to make templates inside of Visual Studio, and that's Mads, and that's it. No one else knows how to do it. You just copy Mads.
I followed your tutorial, but as I said, it just had the downside that it didn't. If I was doing it, I was doing it wrong because it didn't update things, But yeah, nothing I've said anyway is that exciting. I don't know any secrets like that at the minute. Like everything I'm talking about, we can put the link in the show notes. But it all comes from the README for the MAUI because it's all on GitHub, open source. You can look at it, you can change it, you can raise questions. But yeah, very much clear as day. .NET CLI support, yes.
Excellent.
And we all know what that means. That's .NET New.
Exactly right. Exactly. But that kind of needs to happen anyway because I feel. From my personal perspective, again, I'm not an MVP, not a Microsoft employee, but from my personal perspective, I feel like the CLI experience has been the first class citizen for reasons that are essentially Visual Studio itself. The version of Visual Studio for Windows isn't available for Mac, isn't available for Linux, with good reason. And so I have felt, in my own personal opinion, that .NET New, .NET CLI has become the first-class citizen. And then the people who like the GUIs, who like to move the mouse pointers and click, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of stuff that I can do really quickly with a mouse pointer, and there's a lot of stuff I can do really quickly with the CLI. But for the people who like to stick in file new project, you haven't typically gotten things as fast as the CLI folks, because like I said, building those extensions into Visual Studio is hard and only one person knows how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, not only is this being recorded months before it comes out, but also, .NET 6 is quite a way away. So things will change and, what's going to actually happen with the templates and what have you, I don't know. But all I know at the moment is that the .NET CLI is supported. On Twitter, I was told that I can use the templating engine in theory to create new templates. So, it should be exciting times ahead. It just, asterisk, subject to change.
Absolutely. And that's one of the important things that I've wanted to get across when talking about the sort of the new technologies that are coming out. And I think you hit the nail right on the head there when you said that. We are recording this. This for the people who are listening to this on day of release. Yes, we recorded this on August 14th of 2020, which is way ahead of the .NET 5 actual release. It's still in one of the early access previews, and MAUI is .NET 6. So that's at least a year and a bit away from where we're sitting. So
yeah. Absolutely. So a lot, anything I say here could completely change. But at the moment, as far as I'm aware of it, it even says on the GitHub page, as I mentioned, that CLI will be supported. And because I tried the templates, I know about the templating engine. So what they're going to do with that stuff, who knows? It's exciting to see, but I don't know the answer right now. But there's a lot of potential, and that's what's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I remember being blown away by when I talked to Jim was he'd said, and I think you've mentioned it earlier on, and you said that we could maybe loop back to it, is Tizen.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the thing that he said that blew me away was he'd said the Tizen system, all of these Samsung devices, the phones, the TVs, the watches, the fridges, they all support Tizen, and Tizen's official, in bunny quotes, at least at the time when he said that, I don't know whether it's changed, the official programming language and platform is C#.NET. So, being blown away by the fact that I could potentially buy a Tizen fridge, write a Xamarin app for it, run it on the fridge, and then when the nonsense has ended, invite all my friends around and go, look, I wrote that app. And they can go, Jimmy, you're weird. And then I go get some new friends, right?
Yeah, you still can. So
excellent.
Samson and the Tizen team have a very good relationship with the Xamarin team at Microsoft, and they're forever contributing. So Tizen has excellent support that's forever evolving. I think Tizen might be one of the biggest contributors. I don't work at Microsoft. I'm not a program manager at Microsoft, so I can't reel off stats like some of my wonderful friends in the Xamarin team can. But yeah, certainly Tizen and Samson make a lot of contributions to Forms, so the support is very much there. I don't own a smart fridge, let alone a Tizen fridge, so I couldn't go, I've run one in the wild and it worked. But yeah, Tizen is supported, so there's nothing stopping you making your own, to-do app, let's be honest, we all do it, and sticking it on your fridge. To-do, buy more food.
Yeah, exactly, right. It is pretty brilliant. RJJ is the only program exclusively for .NET developers. Learn how to prototype, code, launch, and market your mobile app product, whether you're an indie developer starting out or a dev lead wanting to bring mobile development in-house. Interested in ML.NET? RJJ shows how to utilize ML.NET in your mobile product, walking you through the code, functional limitations, and the privacy implications you need to be aware of when using machine learning. Try out the program for free at areyouadev.com, that's areyouadev.com, and get a complimentary 20-minute one-to-one chat with a fellow developer to ask any program or technical questions. It consistently blows me away that .NET is finally reaching that. I say finally, it's been like 5 years, 6 years in the making, that we've reached that pinnacle that Java promised us towards the middle 90s. That was write your code once and just run it everywhere. And we still haven't hit that with Java. But with .NET, we are officially write once, run it anywhere, with a few small caveats.
Yeah, it's so write once, run anywhere, like you say, the few caveats, to the point that Microsoft actually, say .NET everywhere. It's one of their, at least it certainly last year was one of their slogans, and you see it in their slide decks. And, Jim, actually, who I'm very good friends with and I've, spent plenty of time with, he gave a talk at an event that we both spoke at together. I think it was in 2018 in Germany. And he actually did the keynote and he talked about .NET everywhere, and he was showing it off from, screenless IoT devices to all sorts of things. If it can run .NET, it can run Xamarin. But like you say, with caveats. So, for example, Unity can run with .NET. And so, as I touched on at the beginning, I tried sticking a Xamarin app on my Oculus Quest. It crashed my Quest, but that's only because I might have written it wrong, because I don't do Unity. So that's probably more on me. But for me, what blows me away is the fact that I didn't even hesitate to go, oh, it supports .NET. All right, let's stick a Xamarin app on it then. And, Oculus Quest, I know nothing about it. I just use it to play Beat Saber and get some exercise in. Exactly. Yeah, it's the fact that you don't hesitate to go, oh, it's .NET, I'll just give it a try.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, you spotted earlier this week that the iOS 14 support is already there in one of the preview builds of Xamarin. So
yeah, of course, it's in as we speak, it's in a preview. So obviously, no one's going to hear this until much later, and it'll probably be on iOS, possibly even on iOS 15 by that point. Maybe not, but. Yeah, it'll be out of preview by the time you come. But obviously, if anyone listening to this uses preview to do stuff like iOS 15 or whatever, there of course is a caveat, it's in preview, so there might be issues. But you still have access to these things to try it out. I wouldn't recommend preview anything if you're working in a proper app that needs to be, you need to make sure it's fully stable. But even so, it's the possibilities are endless and it's so exciting. And I think the move to MAUI and .NET 6, because, MAUI's Forms, so .NET 6 and Xamarin is more than just MAUI. But, it's just exciting to see what's going to happen. And so much is going in the right direction.
It really is. It really is. And, I personally am incredibly excited to see what happens in the next 6 to 8 months. Because obviously .NET... Yeah, because .NET 5 will get released. And then we'll start getting... Obviously, MVPs will likely be told first, but we'll start getting drip feeds of... This is going to happen in .NET 6, and this is going to happen in .NET 7, and this is going to happen in .NET 8. And you'll be like, oh, wow.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think Build 2021 is going to be a great place to be.
Let's hope that all of this nonsense can be over by then, so they can do it in person, and then I can have a reason not to go because it'll be too expensive.
So Microsoft actually announced that they're not doing anything non-digital until at least July 2021. So Build will definitely be virtual next year. But Build is free, so it just means that even more people can sign up and attend and learn about all the exciting things happening.
Exactly. Excellent.
Well, Build is free when it's virtual, just to clarify. It's not free in real life. I got to go a couple of years ago, actually, which is when I was sat next to James watching him do some stuff. And that was hanging out with James in real life is a pretty cool experience. He laughs when you say that you get starstruck the first time you meet him. But anyone, most people have heard of James Montemagno, let's be honest. And he's just such a nice guy as well. But I actually got to go to Build thanks to Jim. So it's a nice little full circle because Jim, if you haven't listened to the episode, Jim is a senior cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. He's in the education team now and does a lot of stuff with Python and IoT, but he's historically been a Xamarin developer. He was, before they changed the structure of the team and he moved to education, he was the go-to, one of the go-to Xamarin developer advocates. And as part of that, they were able to give tickets to Build to members of the community. So he kindly donated me a ticket. I still had to personally fund the flights and the hotel, but I got to go to Build because of him. So yeah, it was one of the best experiences of my life.
Cool.
So if you can attend Build virtually, do it.
Yeah, definitely. I remember Build this year, and I was like, it was like a 3-day rolling conference. There was stuff that was different for each day, but most of it was kind of repeated. And I was sitting there going, it's 2:00 in the morning. I'm really tired, but I'm super excited to see what this talk's going to be about.
Yeah, no, Build was interesting for me because I actually sort of got involved a couple of times. So in parallel, the Microsoft developer Twitch account was running streams where they will have guests on or employees on to talk about things that got mentioned at Build. So, for example, I think he had a guest, but I might be wrong, David Ortonau, who's another principal program manager for mobile-related things. He came on and talked about Maui after it had been announced. Because he'd been dropping Easter eggs for months by putting Hawaiian themes in some of his applications. But yeah, so once that came out, he came on the stream and he did a section where he started to talk through it and people could ask questions. And so one of the things I got to do was join another Microsoft employee who was on the Xamarin team but now works on Code Spaces. And I was actually a guest on his slot on the Build channel for the sort of the Build live stream. And then later on in the week, I was honoured to be invited to be a guest on the UK's coverage. So they were doing this, I can't remember what they called it now, but I think was it Build Live or something? I'm not sure, but it was what would normally be like Channel 9's studio where they're sat there, and they have the desk and they're constantly interviewing guests. But to deal with the time zones, they had presenters from around the world. So when the UK contingent were on, which was Dean, Brian and Amy Boyd, they did a fantastic job. Oh, and then I think it was Asim and Simone on the first, for 2 days, and then Dean and Amy for the next 2. But when Dean and Amy were presenting, I was invited on for like a 10-minute slot just to talk about my thoughts on Build. And yeah, let's be honest, a lot of people attend Build. So I was a little bit distracted by nerves, but yeah, Build this year was definitely exciting. And yeah, it was fun to see the Easter egg, David's Easter egg finally out in the wild and we could talk about it.
One of the things, I don't know whether you can talk about some of these, hopefully you can, but I was wondering, of all the Xamarin projects you've ever heard of, are there some that you sort of stick out to and go, hey, that's really cool, I wish I'd have thought of that, or like, oh, that's really innovative, or, what a brilliant idea. Is there anything that sort of sticks out?
So, I can't think of any directly that jump out at me, but I think one of the cool things about Xamarin is that how many apps are actually written in Xamarin that you have no idea. So, everyone's heard of the BBC, and I know the BBC is very much British, but a lot of people around the world, know about the BBC, and I really enjoyed cooking. And so an app I've got on my phone is BBC Good Food, which gives me recipes and stuff for ingredients, and that's a Xamarin app. Other cool ones as well are UPS. Trying to think, there is actually, I'll send you a link that you can put in the show notes, but there is actually a whole page about that Microsoft have of customers that use Xamarin, and that's always an interesting one. And even in-house stuff, some of it is written with Xamarin. So the Microsoft News app uses Xamarin. If anyone does DevOps stuff and has the Azure Portal app on their phones, that's the Xamarin app. Because it's all native features, you wouldn't know when you use it. But yeah, a lot of these apps you might have heard of. I say like UPS, like Microsoft News, even Just Giving and ones like that. There's a lot of companies that are using Xamarin to make apps. And I think a few years ago there was a cool one. I think Pepsi Max was some kind of like ad game thing with an app where you could, I think it was augmented reality based. I just remember it involved football. I think it tied in with the World Cup. That was a Xamarin app.
Cool.
So I think for me it's less about, oh wow, it can do this, and it's more like, oh my God, look how many people use this. Or, I didn't realise until I looked into this that BBC Good Food is written in Xamarin. So it's just, for me, it's just really interesting, the wide perspective of large corporations that you would have heard of that use Xamarin.
Yeah.
And then, but other cool stuff. So these aren't sort of officially out in the App Store apps, and they're not secret. They're just like proof of concept things that I've talked about in some of my talks is using Microsoft's AI/machine learning service, Azure Cognitive Services with Xamarin to do some cool things. So some interns at Microsoft Garage a couple of years ago actually developed an app that allows you to take photos of X-rays, of chest X-rays, and then uses Cognitive Services to look at the pictures and decide whether there's anything like pleural thickening or other reasons to be concerned in the X-rays. Which means that a doctor who's not a specialist in like cardiothoracic stuff, so like, is it chest and heart, they can just be qualified to take the X-ray. Then the app can then you don't need a consultant in maybe a city that's far away. So it opens up all these health things to the developing world. And there's some other great ones as well, like skin cancer prediction. So for me, I think the most exciting use of Xamarin is combined with Cognitive Services. So that's definitely my favourite.
Excellent. I do. I went to a talk that Scott Guthrie gave, and he was like, Azure Cognitive Services and Machine Learning is awesome. And he just crafted a whole thing in front of me. And it was a silly app idea, but it really showed off what cognitive services can do. It was like an image classification. And he made it public whilst we were there. He was like, go to this URL and put an image in, and it will tell you whether it's me or whether it's a cat. And of course, as soon as he did that, people started abusing it by putting pictures of him and cats. It broke the system. Yeah. But, it could have been worse.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it. It's so easy to get started. So again, Jim will come up a lot because Jim's had a big impact on my life. He's been a great mentor and friend to me over the years, but he gave a talk at one of the Global Azure boot camps that we both talked at together a couple of years ago on cognitive services, and he did something similar with image classifications during his talk. And anyone that's watched Jim talk knows his delivery style is very engaging. So I was just, between the low barrier to entry with cognitive services and Jim's talk, I was hooked. And so it actually led me to create my own app that uses cognitive services. It's open source because the code's on GitHub, but it's certainly not App Store ready. But that uses cognitive services, and I've not had to train anything. I literally just say, here's a picture, tell me the emotion in the picture, or here's some text, tell me what you think the sentiment of it is. Because I'm slightly on the autistic spectrum, and there's plenty of people out there who are neurodiverse who maybe can't read body language and sentiment easily, and so this just opens up a way for me to practice a bit. There's also a good demo app for talks, but I didn't generally use it for things day to day. And so, again, cognitive services, it took fewer than 200 lines of code in this application, and most of it is silly things like setting up HTTP client. So, I'm always blown away by how little effort it takes to set up cognitive services. As I touched on, I didn't even do any kind of prep. I didn't have to go on and say, these are what the emotions are. There's just a load of cognitive services that they've already, sort of services and features that they put for you under different categories that I like to call the 5 pillars of awesome. That you can just go on and have a look at. I think it's language, vision, search, and some other stuff, and it's brilliant. And we can put a link in the show notes to the kind of the docs for cognitive services that show you what it can do. But they've trained millions of bits of data just to make your life easier. So a lot of the time, if you want to say, okay, here's some images of what something is and what it isn't, so you can create your own custom models, great. You can even do it on the portal. I actually created a YouTube video how easy it is to do, where I compared, is this House from House MD or is this Wilson from House MD? But yeah, you can just very, very easily train your own models. But for a lot of the features, you don't need to. It's there for you out of the box. Microsoft have done all the hard work. And so, yeah, I just love content services. And so I think anything with it. And actually, talking of good things, I think one app specifically deserves a shout out. So it was started independently, I think, but it's definitely part of Microsoft now, and the developer behind it works for Microsoft, but something called Seeing AI. So it's a Xamarin app that you can use for the visually impaired, and it will literally use the camera to describe what you're seeing. And so, you can set it to say that I want to care about the scene that I'm in. So it might say, around you is a bench and a path, or it might be you want to focus on people. So it will say, there's a boy on a skateboard doing a trick. But it's literally describing the world to you constantly, so that it's seeing, the AI is seeing the world for you. And I was actually lucky enough during build to meet the developer behind Seeing AI when we all went to a meet and greet with James at a coffee shop. And so you're seeing it in action in the real world, and it just blew my mind.
Wow. See, these are the kinds of stories people need to hear when people come to me. I think at the time of recording, I've released an episode where I'm talking with Luis Quintanilla, and I said to him, look, tell me about machine learning and AI, and tell me how is it the sky is falling and everybody's going to lose their jobs and Terminator and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, no, it's classifying images and helping people. And these are the stories people need to hear. The Seeing AI app needs to be, I had never heard of it before you brought it up, right? And admittedly, I'm not in the machine learning cognitive spaces AI space, but then the majority of the population isn't in that space either. So I think more needs to be sort of said about these wonderful apps.
Yeah, and Microsoft are doing a better job of that. They have this whole dedicated page now. You can literally, if you've made an app using Xamarin and you want it mentioned, you can, I think there's even a GitHub repo where you can just fill out a form, as it were, and then you'll get featured on this page. I think it goes hand in hand, a lot of it, with the sort of open-minded mindset of moving everything to open source, is that they want to go, they want to see Xamarin do cool things. They want to show off what people are doing. The team are very pro giving a spotlight on people. So a lot of listeners might know that the .NET, I think it falls under the .NET Foundation, but they do a .NET community stand-up. I think there's different subjects from, Visual Studio to ASP.NET to maybe GitHub. They do different stand-ups, as they call them. It's always once a month for each topic, but they're on a regular basis staggered through the month. And there's a mobile community stand-up. And so one of the things they do, the first thing they do is go through blog post links for anything interesting that they want to showcase for the month. And Microsoft employees don't count. Like Xamarin employees don't count. They are showcasing the community. They then go through any pull requests from that month, and they, in the release notes and in the stand-up, they give a spotlight to the people whose work in the community has ended up in that release. So, it's amazing what Xamarin can do, but I think it's easier to work with Xamarin because they make you feel cared about and want, you feel like, if I do something cool, they're going to care about it and they'll help me with it if I'm stuck, and all that stuff is just brilliant.
Sure. Yeah, well, I've talked about how great the .NET community stand-ups are in the past, and I have to say they really are. I'll make sure to put a link. I don't know whether the URL is still around, but it used to be live.asp.net or something along those lines.
Now it's live.net. I never know how it's written. I just remember it because, James tends to be if he's around, the main host of the stand-up for mobile. And sure. Yeah, he's forever talking about live.net, but I never know which way around the dot and the dot go. But yeah, whether it's the word dot, or whether it's the word dot and then dot. I was
just going to say, I think it's both, because there's, I remember talking to some people about, if you go to try.net, you can try .net in the browser, and they're like, I'm sorry, do that one again? Yes. Try.net, and it's try, a full stop, dot, a full stop, net. And they're like, even so, that is a confusing URL.
Yeah. The thing that's great as well, though, is that when they stream these stand-ups, they don't just, it's not just maybe to a dedicated website. They also stream to YouTube, Twitch, I think in the last community stand-up, that it's the first Thursday of the month for mobiles. I think it was last week. I'm sure they were doing it to Periscope on Twitter as well, or there was an extra platform that James wasn't there, I don't think. Oh, no, yes, he was. Sorry, James, if you hear this. I didn't forget about you, I promise. But I've watched a lot of content in the last week. But yeah, it's not just on these different platforms, which means that, there's I think it might be on the .NET Foundation channel on YouTube, but you could just Google it on YouTube. Not Google it, search it on YouTube. God, we're way too trained to use Google instead of the word search. But yeah, it's all on YouTube. So there's a playlist of all the previous ones, and there's even a sub channel for Xamarin, but we can touch on that one later. But yeah, certainly all the .NET community stand-up stuff is very easy to watch back, and it's just I've attended some of the other ones, like the Visual Studio one, because we all care about our IDE. But yeah, certainly I can vouch for the fact that in the mobile stand-up they shine a spotlight on the people that use Xamarin, because as they always argue, yes, they're the people making the tools, but if there's no one to use it, then what's the point? So they very much put an emphasis on improving. David Ortonau sends out Xamarin Forms surveys almost monthly just to improve, and he reads every single response he gets.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I think Xamarin's great. And, if you've got an app you want to show off, tell them about it. And they will give you the space to shout about it. James does a YouTube show with Channel 9 called Xamarin Show, where he brings on guests either for short or long form episodes, and they'll talk about whether it's a new feature or a library they've written. But again, it's a place where James goes, well, this is cool. Come talk about it, show the people. So yeah, I just think they've got a really great open-minded mindset of showing off other people's stuff. So, pick up Xamarin, show off what you've done, be proud of it.
Awesome.
And don't be afraid of it.
Good. Because that was going to be the next thing that I ask about. We're unfortunately coming towards the end of our sort of allotted time. So I was just wondering, what are some of your favorite resources for learning about Xamarin? Right, there might be someone who listens to this and goes, "Xamarin sounds amazing. I want to go learn it." What's the best place to go and sort of figure out what to do? Yeah,
so I'll give you a few of them, because everyone's heard about learning styles. Everyone learns differently. So I'll kind of try and cover some of the different content styles. So if you prefer written, then, you can go to docs.com, and there on the landing page, you will see on the right, I believe it is, or at time of recording, it's on the right, a nice big Xamarin button. If you click it, it'll take you to all the docs. The docs are open source. If you see a mistake or something that you think could be written better, again, there's a little button at the bottom of the page to give feedback. You can just go on GitHub and submit a pull request. So the docs are brilliant. It covers forms, native, navigation, the different parts of the things you might want to achieve in an app and how you do it. So that's great for written content. If you prefer something a bit more interactive, there's Xamarin Pathways or Microsoft Learn. So if you don't know what Microsoft Learn is Microsoft's completely free learning platform. So you can go on there and you can take learning pathways, which are made up of modules or just individual modules for a topic. And the page does allow you to filter it so you can find what you want. But that's brilliant for going on there. So if you want to learn Xamarin stuff, the Xamarin modules, and I think Jim wrote one of them. And so that's a fantastic module. But yeah, there's Xamarin stuff that you can learn. Then there's obviously there's other stuff as well on Learn. And if you're using Azure, for example, it actually creates sandboxes in the browser for you. So it doesn't cost you a penny either to try out all these services. So Learn's a brilliant one for written, but it's more interactive because you're actually going off to do something, and it's more like a talk you through it stuff. The .NET Foundation's GitHub, which again we can put in the show notes. James recently released a new Xamarin Forms workshop on there. So that's another kind of route to go down. Or if you prefer listening, it's not so much how to get started, but if you just want to learn a bit more about certain things where you've got an interest, there's a official Xamarin podcast where James is joined by Matt Sokop, who's another senior developer advocate at Microsoft. So they do that together. Then, as I mentioned earlier, James does Merge Conflict, which has a lot of stuff in it as well. And then, lastly, if you prefer videos, there's loads on loads on YouTube. A lot of people create content, but there is an official Xamarin Developers channel. I think it's a sub-channel of .NET, or like Visual Studio. But I think if you just type Xamarin Developer into YouTube, you'll find it. And that's where you'll find James's Xamarin show. James did it originally, but Maddie Leger's taken it on as a Xamarin Forms 101. So she'll take you through a little snippet of, maybe you want to achieve this today. And then the video will show you how to do it in literally a few minutes. So if you like videos, that's a great one. So yeah, there really is like resources to suit your learning style. So it's not about does the resources exist. It's more, well, what way do you want to learn? And here's a way to do it.
Okay, cool. That's really good to know. I get loads of stick because I always bring it up. My friend Paul says to me that he gets upset to hear how many times I say that I'm an auditory learner. So I definitely prefer the sort of the audio, but obviously putting across code in audio that's a non-starter, unless of course. For some people, unless of course maybe you're visually impaired or whatever, but reading out code in a podcast, public static void main parentheses
Yes.
open squiggly brackets. Isn't it? That's going to get you nowhere, right?
Well, so I've not. It's JavaScript. I think it might be Python. I'm sure it's JavaScript. But there's a Microsoft MVP here in the UK called Rob Miles, who recently I've not listened to it because it's not a language that I have a particular desire to use, but I'm sure he started a podcast series recently where he's actually teaching code. And so I might find a link to it actually for the show notes, because that might be quite interesting to listen to how he's teaching you something just auditory or auditorily, whatever the word would be.
It's interesting that you brought up Rob Miles because I studied computer science at Hull University and he was the first lecturer that I had.
Oh, what a great lecturer to have!
Oh yeah, he's genius. Is Rob? He I think I can't remember the actual joke, but at my graduation ceremony, he was the sort of person giving the speeches, and he said the problem with these things is you'll get really nervous. So the best thing to do is to talk about an icebreaker, and then he talked about a ship that breaks ice. It's
that sounds like it was last year now. It feels like yesterday. After Build, real life Build, they Microsoft do what they call the Insider Tour. And so what the Insider Tour is kind of the full-time employees get given a break because Build is very, very intense to prep for. And so they go, well, we still want to kind of get the word out there about the stuff that we've announced at Build. So they ask MVPs to get involved in it might be Insider Dev Tour, actually, not Insider. I should know this. I spoke at 3 of them last year in the space of a week. But I think it was London, Manchester and Brussels. That was cool. But Rob was there for... Is it London and Manchester, I think? But he did one of the talks and it was just brilliant. It was IoT stuff and he's just, he's like such a genius, like you say, but so funny with it at the same time. He's clever and it's, really nice guy. But he did a podcast on learning to code. So I might give it a listen and so we can see how you do curly brace in over a video. I guess a lot of it is you just talk through it as best you can, but then put episode links in where you put a code sample.
Sure, that makes sense.
And guys, I stream, so I should know better, but if you're down with the kids and like Twitch streams, there's a lot of people who stream as well. So like James streams usually every week, but there's other people as well out in the community who do Xamarin streams every week. So if you like streams where you can watch it happen live, but also interact and ask questions, then Twitch or YouTube, streaming is an option anyway.
Okay, excellent. I don't know whether you've noticed, Luce, for the Insider Baseball, when we do these, when I'm interviewing, I keep bashing the microphone. When I'm interviewing someone, we have a sort of video feed so that we can see, if I lean back and then that kind of thing. But I've also been making copious amounts of notes. I'm on my 3rd page of notes. So hopefully all of these things will go into the show notes. So for future reference, Jamie, when you come round to edit this, Jamie, all of these things need to go in the show notes. Excellent. So, where can people go to find out more about what you're doing and the work that you're doing and the stuff you're putting out there for people to do?
So the best one is probably Twitter. So I'm at LuceCarter1 on Twitter. I'd love to be at LuceCarter, but you know what it's like with Twitter. Someone steals your name first. Well, no, I think it's because I used to be called something else on Twitter, but then when I started to actually use Twitter properly and public speak, I changed my username to be something, so I was a bit too late. But yeah, Twitter's the best one because if I write a blog or I maybe decide to go live on Twitch or post a video on YouTube, I'll always tweet about it. So yeah, Twitter's definitely the place to go. Of course, I'm also on GitHub as it'd be Luce Carter, but we can put it on the show notes. So, as I touched on very briefly earlier, all my code is out in the open. As an MVP, I'm entitled to be a pro on GitHub, which means I could have private repos, but I choose not to. So if you want to look at my code and judge it accordingly, then go for it. But yeah, Twitter's the main one, and I don't keep my DMs closed or anything. So if anyone's got any questions, honestly, just message me on Twitter. I try and get back to everyone. Because learning's fun. Why not help people?
Absolutely, absolutely. Being able to sort of help someone get to that moment where they go, oh, I totally get it now. And then they get super excited and say, check out the thing that I've built. And you're like, that's awesome. That's just, you didn't have something and now you have something. Look at how amazing it is to create all of these things.
Yeah, and also it sounds like a bit of a shameless plug, but I co-curate the weekly Xamarin newsletter with Kim Philpott, who works at Microsoft, but he used to work for Xamarin University before Xamarin got purchased and they just merged it into Learn. I miss Xamarin University. But yeah, so Kim and I curate the newsletter, which is, we can put it in the show notes, but it's just weeklyxamarin.com. And what that is a newsletter that we bring out every Friday. Well, Friday for us anyway, or me. Where we just curate some of the best community blog posts or posts in general from that week. So it's not just community, it's also Microsoft as well, but it might be blogs, it might be podcasts and videos as well. So if you just want a quick place to go and get, the latest cool posts and content coming out about Xamarin, you can subscribe to the newsletter so you can actually get it to your inbox as well, not just a web page. So it feels like a bit of a shameless plug, but it is genuinely a really good place to go to find a really wide variety of content.
Excellent. See, I'd have put that down in the learning resources if that was me. But, I may do that anyway. Because why not, right? It's somewhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good resource for learning, I guess. So just because I'm involved in it, it just feels a bit of a shameless plug to go, yeah, if you want to learn it, come look at our newsletter. I just mention it because it is genuinely useful. Like I've had people... some of the only times in my life I've ever been recognised when I've gone somewhere is a Xamarin event where people are going, oh yeah, I know your face from the newsletter. So, it does help people.
Yeah. I'll talk about
it's bizarre when you go to an event, when you go to something and it's like you go to get your name badge, you're like, oh, I know who you are, you go.
Yeah, I'll talk about it off air, but I've had a similar experience at a conference where someone sort of spotted me and went, Jamie, oh my goodness, I got to talk to you about the podcast. That was an amazing experience. But yeah, but that's essentially covering all the things that we were going to talk about. So thank you ever so much for being on the show, Luce. It's been a real pleasure. I've had a laugh. I've learned a lot of stuff, and I hope that the listeners will too.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and yeah, I'm not quite sure whether you need to learn about my Xamarin Shrine, but why not?
Yeah, right. Why not? Makes you a more 3D person, I feel. To know
absolutely, I'm a real person.
That's it.
Being neurodiverse, people can joke I'm a bit like a robot. I'm not, but you feel like one sometimes when you can't understand someone's face expression. But yeah, we all have things that we love, and I love Xamarin.
That's it. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Luce. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That was my interview with Luce Carter on the amazing things happening in Xamarin and Maui. Be sure to check out the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at .netcore.show, and there will be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave me a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/subscribe for ways to do that, and to come back next time for more .NET Core goodness. See you again real soon. See you later, folks. The .NET Core podcast is a production of RJJ Software Ltd.